Okay, I'm going to do a short video for, I'm sorry, I'm going to do a short demonstration which is for animating a character. And this is just kind of, most of the stuff that I'm going to go over in this demonstration we've done in one form or another in other ways. But it's just going over like the structure for setting up an animated character so that you can move the facial expressions and the body and everything in sync with each other. So I have a sketch which is in the week 13 folder, which is called Character Animation Sketch. This is the sketch I'm going to be using for it. So if you want to follow along with the demonstration, you can use that sketch. It's in the week 13 folder for the class files. So I'm going to make a new animate file, which is 1080 by 768. Once you've created the new animate file, the next thing we want to do is to bring in the sketch. So I'm going to go to File, Import, Import to Stage, browse for that file, so again that's inside DMAD 280, inside class files, inside week 13, and it's called characteranimation.jpg. And it's a really simple character of a guy with horns. Just place that into the file to begin with. I'm videoing this, by the way, Shelley. You can video it yourself if you want to, but I am doing a screen recording of it if you want. To use this as a template, what I would suggest you do is that once you've placed the image, select it and then choose Modify Convert to Symbol. It doesn't really matter whether it's a graphic or a movie clip symbol, but it would be better if it's a symbol. And then I'm just going to call this character. Once you've converted it into a symbol, if you then select the symbol, over in the Properties panel under Color Effects, I'm going to choose Alpha and drop the alpha down so that it's a screened back version of that original sketch. Once you've got that, we're then going to go ahead, let's change the name of this layer to template and make a new layer. On the new layer, I'm going to call it body. I'm going to make another layer which I'll call mouth. I'll make another layer which I'm going to call eyes. Another one which I'm going to call eyebrows. I'm going to make another one which is going to be called left horn. And another one which is going to be called right horn. So those are the various elements that I want as part of the character, each separated into different layers. The purpose, of course, of separating into different layers is that so you can animate them separately. It gives you more control that way. And I'm doing this on the main timeline. In reality, you might want to do this inside of a symbol, so you have the character inside of a symbol. But don't forget that you could always copy the frames from the main timeline, create a new symbol, and place them in there afterwards, which is something I quite often do. For the body, I'm going to use the pen tool to draw this shape out. So you could also use the paintbrush and blob out the shape. It's whichever is easier for you. But I'm going to use the pen tool to accurately draw out this shape. Once I have the shape drawn out, I actually don't really want this to have a stroke. I just want it to be a fill with no stroke. So the next thing I want to do is choose the color for the fill and then fill that color with the paint bucket.
So this is the color that I'm going to use. If you want to use the same color, it's the hex number for this is FDC and then BCB. FDC BCB. And then choosing the paint bucket, I'm going to fill inside that shape. I lost the color now. So I'll fill inside that, and then I'm going to reselect the stroke around the outside and delete it. Of course, when you draw out the shape of the body, you're going to end up covering all of the other bits that we need to draw next. So remember that in the layers panel, next to where the name is and the lock icons and so on, you have a little colored square or colored rectangle which indicates the outline mode. You could do everything in outline by clicking the one right at the very top, but I'm just going to turn this layer off, which is for the body, and it looks like I drew it on the wrong layer. So I'm going to select this, cut it, put it onto the body layer by doing Shift Command V or paste in place. And then let's lock this other layer as well. So I'm going to lock my template layer so I don't move that by mistake or draw on it by mistake. Let's also lock the body layer and then turn the body layer to outlines. The mouth I'm going to change a little bit from the sketch. So when you're working on your drawings, you could design your character as sketches, but then when you're working on it and making a more finalized version, you could obviously edit this. So I'm going to round off the sides of the mouth a little bit. So this one, I want to make sure I'm on the mouth layer, lock up the layer underneath. So I'm going to have this go more like that. And then for this, I'm going to choose like a dark sort of reddish color for the fill. And then again, I'm going to delete the stroke around the outside. So then I've got my mouth on one layer. Then I'll start with the eyes. So the eye is going to be white, and it's going to have a stroke of that dark brown color. And then I'm just going to draw an ellipse. The ellipse I'm going to want to rotate slightly so it fits to the angle of the head better. And then I also want another one on the other side. So let me select all of that. Hold Option, drag it across to duplicate it, and kind of nudge it into position. So on the eyes, I'm going to make these into a symbol. So with them both selected, I'm going to choose Modify, Convert to Symbol, and call it Eyes. And then we'll go up to the eyebrow layer. On the eyebrow layer, I'm going to draw just like a little mark here for the eyebrow. So right now my paint is set to paint selection, which is why it's not drawing. If you change it here to paint normal, then I can make them up. This might be something that we haven't really talked about a lot, but one of the one of the great features in Animate for drawing is the ability to draw in various ways. So if you're on the paintbrush, if you click on this, you've got paint normal, paint fills, paint behind, paint selection, and paint inside. So when you're drawing, you can switch between these different modes. So for instance, if you're painting, I think we've done this in the last demonstration, where I'd drawn a fill and then selected just the fill, not the stroke. And then by selecting just the fill, I can then paint highlights and shadows into there without it going outside the edge. But for this, I need paint normal. Remember, just like in Photoshop and Illustrator, you can use the bracket keys to change the size of your brush. And I also want to have pressure sensitive turned on for this. So I'm using the tablet. Obviously, you could do this with a mouse, but you're not going to be able to get the same type of marks created. And then don't forget also that in the later versions of Animate, I forget exactly where this came in, I think it was in 2014, you have a brush library, and inside the brush library you have all of those brushes that you had in Illustrator. So I could select these and apply like a charcoal look to them. Select that again. Oh, actually for this one, I'm going to have to use the other paintbrush. Let me do that again. Let's make that a little bit bigger. When you're applying the brushes, you have to double click to apply it. Sometimes it feels like it's not applying because you'll just click on it. You've got to make sure that you double click to apply the brush stroke. I'm now going inside the eye. Remember that the eyes would turn into a symbol. And then I'm going to select those and change this also into a brush stroke. And then I'll thicken that a little bit. The next shape I'm going to draw is the horn. Again, I'm going to do this with the pen tool. You could do it with the paintbrush, but I just feel like I have more control with the pen tool to position exactly where I want the paths to go. The horn, I'm going to fill it with white, and then once I've got that set up, let's make the stroke a little bit thicker on that one. Once I have that set up, I'm going to convert this into a symbol, so modify, convert to symbol. I'll call this horn. And then I want a duplicate of this, so I'll hold Option and drag it across to the other side. And then I'm going to cut it, and then put it on the layer for the right horn. And then I'm in the transform panel. I'm going to reflect it, so it's facing the opposite direction. And then also rotate it slightly. So with the free transform tool, I'm just going to rotate that around a little bit. You might also want to position on with the free transform tool these pivot points, so they're kind of where the horn would rotate from. And then lastly, the right horn wants to go behind the body, so that will be hidden once I have the body showing up again. It'll be hidden behind there. So that's the initial setup. So I've got, basically you're separating elements that you want to move separately into different layers. That's the first thing. And then we've got to think about how we want to move it. So depending on how you're moving it, will vary a little bit as to whether you're using shape tweens or whether you're using classic tweens, or which objects you want to keep as symbols, which objects you want to keep as shapes. So for instance, for the body, it would be possible to do the movement for the body as a shape tween, where you change the shape of the body. So let's say, for instance, in this, we're going to have him kind of like lean back and kind of as if he's roaring. So in that case, you could go out to a further point and then make it shape tween from there. So if I went out to, say, frame 10, insert a keyframe, and I want to do that on the right layer. Oops, we'll get it right in a minute. Insert a keyframe. And then once I've inserted the keyframe, I could change the shape of this. So we could either redraw it, or we could modify the shape itself. So if I unlock that layer, I can then select this, and with the free transform tool, I can kind of adjust the shape. If we position the pivot point down at the bottom, that way I'll be rotating or scaling from there. I'm going to drag this over a little bit. I'm also going to have it come down. Actually, let's have it go up slightly. Let it go up slightly. If you want to see what you've done before, you can also put the onion skin effect on, so you can see its original position as you're doing this. We could also use rotate by putting a cursor just outside and rotating the figure. You could also use the direct selection tool to change the shape of the body a little bit. So we can maybe move this point, for instance, over a little bit. And then perhaps re-angle this one. So that way we're sort of distorting the body a little bit as it moves. And then if you were to create a shape tween between here, we then have this effect. Now the problem with shape tweens, of course, is that you may end up having to do shape hinting on this. Let me take the onion skin off for a second. So you can see right now it's kind of flipping around into a different position. Remember, you could fix that by doing shape hinting. So you do Shift-Command-H to add some shape hints. And generally, you'd want to add a shape hint where however many anchor points you've got. So on this one, if I was to select it, I've got 2 at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hints. So do Shift-Command-H 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then drag those into position. And I've got to find this anchor point now. So that looks like it's pretty close. You should be able to feel it snap into position. If you don't feel it snap into position, go to snapping and make sure that snap to objects is turned on. So I can't really find the other one. So I'm going to select it again with the direct selection tool. It's around here, so that'll make it easier for me. And then I'd go back to view and then go to show shape hints. You can also use Shift-Command-I to bring that up. So this one actually needs to go down. It's around here somewhere, but I can't really find the snapping. One of the points of showing you this, anyway, is to show you how fiddly this part of it is. So although they're not quite on, it seems to be working right now. So I've got it to, so that's one way that we could do it, is we could use a shape hint to move the body. I was going to show you a different way though, which is using the bone tool as a way to do it. So let's take the shape hint off for a second. And then I'm going to clear this keyframe. And then if I choose the bone tool, I can then set points up here. For what I'm going to do here, I can probably just get away with that. Now, if it was something that was, if we wanted to do more complicated movement, you might also want to have a null at the end, so you could grab it from the top like we did with the other bone tool feature. But for this, I think we can just get away with doing it like this. And then we would go back to this point, and then I can move this. So I can take this and move it over a little bit. If you want to keep it static at the bottom, don't forget that you could select this bar or this bone, and then in the properties panel, you can go ahead and take off enable. That means that part of it won't move whilst you're moving the rest of it. So then we have that movement. So this is, for that particular movement, this would be a much quicker way of doing it, because we avoid having to do all that shape hinting. You may find if you have to bend it too far that it starts to distort too much. Like if I go here, you can see that on the side here it starts to break up. But as long as the movement is fairly small, you can usually get away with just using the bone tool to move a shape. When we used the bone tool last time, if you remember, we were doing it on a kind of a full character, and we're using the bone tool to connect symbols together. In this case, we're connecting one part of a shape to another part of a shape, and so that's kind of a useful way to get that similar kind of effect, but with a lot less work. So then if I insert a pose here, I can go ahead and go back to the template layer and see where its original position is, and then I can go ahead and move this back into its original position. So then we have it moving all the way through. For the mouth, I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe at the end of where the body moves. Insert a keyframe. So this position is going to be back to its normal position. And then in the middle, we're going to do another position. So insert keyframe. At this point, obviously, you can see it's out of position with the body because the body's moving. So now we can change the position of the mouth. So I'm going to lock this layer. Yeah.
For animating, is there any sort of like onion kind of like layering that can be done so you could see like it shows what you did in the last?
Well, you have the onion skin effect in the timeline by clicking down here. Is this what you're talking about? So you can see the previous frames.
Oh yeah. So wait.
So you have in an Animate there are actually two onion skin effects. There's this one which is a solid. So you're seeing like a solid color. This is a bit complicated here because it's a tween, but I don't know where you can see that there are striations there. Hang on a sec. So those are all of the different frames. If I was to close this down a little bit, you're only seeing like the last couple of frames. And then this one is the ones which follow on from it. So anything which is green is the next frames. Anything which is blue is the previous frames. And then the other onion skin effect you can have is onion skin outlines, and then it would show it like this. Okay? So on the mouth, I'm going to move this into position here. I'm also going to change the shape of the mouth. So I'm going to get the direct selection tool, and I'm going to change the position of this handle to make it bigger, and change the angle of these. So let's go up a bit further. And then I would create a shape tween between these 2 points. So that still needs a bit of adjusting to get the position of that right, but that's the basic idea. The mouth is probably getting a little bit too big at that point. I'll fix that afterwards. And then for the eyes, remember that the eyes we have as a symbol. So if I go out to the end point and insert a keyframe, and then in the middle point I insert a keyframe again. And at this point I obviously need to move them. So I'm going to drag them up here, rotate them a little bit. I might also want to squash them a little bit. And then I can put a classic tween between these. So for this horn, we can do the same kind of thing. This will basically be the same as the eyes. I would insert a keyframe at the end, so it's back to its original position. I'll insert a keyframe at the middle point. So this one, I'm going to need to move it, and I'm also going to need to rotate it. I've positioned the pivot point where it should rotate, so I can rotate this out a little bit. Add the classic tween between those points. And then we've got the horn moving with the body. And then we would do the same thing, obviously, for the other horn. So you'd add a keyframe at the end to hold it in position. Add another keyframe in the middle. Position it in the center. So I'm going to position this over here. I'm going to rotate it. Again, I've got the pivot point where I want it to rotate from. I'm going to rotate this around a little bit. Create a classic tween on those. So we've now got the character moving. For the eyebrows, this is a decision you can decide to make yourself on your own character. So the eyebrows can be really effective in terms of expressing emotion. You can make somebody kind of say things just with their eyebrows. So it may be worthwhile separating the eyebrows onto separate layers and animating them individually so that you could have one eyebrow go up and another eyebrow go down and so on. That's a decision that you can make yourself. The process other than that would be the same as what I'm doing for like the horn and for the eyes. So you'd have it be a symbol, and then you can move it into position where as the other parts of the body move into position. So I'm not going to go through the rest of this because I think the rest of it is pretty much the same thing that we've been doing. It's adding tweens in those positions. So I've got a starting point and an ending point and the position where it moves. My mouth kind of enlarges there and then comes back down. So on the mouth, I might work on that a little bit more with the shape hinting because it feels like it's distorting too much as it comes back down. The other thing you might want to include is to select on all of the tweens, and you could do all of these together because they'd want to work in the same way. And then over in the properties, if you go into the section where it has the ease setting, so I can do all of this row together. Instead of classic ease, I would do ease in out, and then I'll try something like cubic, quart, or quad, depending on how much you want it to affect. And then I'll do that on each of these ones. Ease in, ease out, cubic. That's what I'm doing. Yeah. And then also don't forget that when you're applying this, you have to double click on it. So over here, when you choose the ease in out, you're not just clicking on cubic. You double click on it to apply it, otherwise it won't work. Same on the armature layer. So for this one, the ease is going to be set up a little bit different, but it's going to be stop and start fast. So last one. So like I said, the mouth still needs a little bit of work on that, but that's the basic movement anyway. There's really a couple of ways that you can animate your characters. So one of them is by using the computer to do the in-between parts of it, which is what I'm doing on this one with the various tweens. The other process that you can use, of course, is to set up a rig which uses the bone tool. So you have symbols for all of those different characters. And then finally, the other way is to do literally frame by frame animation. They have both those approaches have advantages and disadvantages, but with frame by frame animation, obviously it's pretty time consuming to do that because you're doing all of these drawings in between, which here the computer's doing for you. But it does also give you some more control. So there's a limitation when you're doing these tweens that the body can only basically move in a particular direction, so you can't have too much of a sense of 3 dimensions, although you can kind of cheat it a little bit and have the eyes move around the side of the face as if the head's turning and things like that. But setting up a rig is usually used for something where you have a character in 3/4 view or straight on or half view, and it stays in that view over time, and then you set up the keyframes and then have the tweening do the bits in between. Whereas with the frame by frame, you can have things kind of modulate a little bit more, and so it gives it a different style of animation, but it also can give you a little bit more control. It's just really time consuming to do it. All right, that's all I'm going to do for demonstration.